It was a busy weekend of moves for not just the Orioles, but for other teams around the league. We'll try to get to them all. A couple of minor league signings for the Orioles and some other trades that could impact what Mike Elias does this offseason. That's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Monday, December 23rd, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we're going to break down some minor Orioles news and notes from the past couple of days. Orioles made a couple of minor league signings in Jordyn Adams and Matt Bowman. We'll talk about what Adams could bring to the organization and if Bowman can return to this team to compete for a bullpen spot. And then we'll get to a couple of other news and notes from around the league. 3 former Orioles signed minor league deals with other organizations over the past few days. We'll talk about that. And there were some interesting trades around the league that could actually impact the O's. But we'll get to all of that coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. So we start today with one of 2 minor league signings that the Orioles have made since I last recorded here. Of course, the O's made a major league signing last week with Tomoyuki Sugano coming in from Japan on a 1-year, $13 million deal to join the back end of the Orioles rotation. Now they add 2 more of their depth with a couple of minor league deals. And the first one being an intriguing outfielder and former top prospect in Jordyn Adams, who Robert Murray of FanSided first reported last week that the Orioles have signed to a minor league contract. Now, Adams, 25 years old at this point, a right-handed hitting outfielder who was a first-round pick by the Los Angeles Angels back in 2018 out of high school. He has made it to the big leagues, which we'll talk about, but he was DFA'd by the Angels this offseason, became a free agent, and the Orioles brought him in on a minor league deal with an invite to big league spring training. He will be fighting for an opening day roster spot. More than likely, as we'll get to, he ends up in AAA Norfolk in the outfield to begin the season. But who is Jordyn Adams? Well, first of all, as I mentioned, he's made his debut already. Between 2023 and 2024, he played 28 big league games with the Angels. Now, wasn't a whole lot of success in those 28 games and 78 plate appearances. He's slashing 176, 205, 216 with 1 home run, a 36% strikeout rate, and a 4% walk rate. That is good for a 12 WRC plus in his 78 big league plate appearances. Not a whole lot of success so far for the 25-year-old Jordyn Adams, but he was once a top 5 prospect in the Angels system and has really been a freak athlete for a long time. He was committed out of high school to play both football and baseball at North Carolina, but he was picked in the first round by the Angels. That came with a $4 million signing bonus. And, this was back in 2018. Guys, at least above board, were not making the money they sometimes can now through NIL. And that was enough for him to sign pro with the Angels. It was, I think, generally known that he was at that point a better baseball player than a football player, but he was good enough to be a Division I player at an ACC school in both sports. So there's a chance he could have gone to UNC and ended up going with the football path. But he went the baseball path with the Angels. And a lot of it was just because of the tools he showed. Now, he was a great high school player, and he was a top prospect heading into that draft. And he was also a crazy athlete. When he's gotten to the big leagues, 98th percentile sprint speed, can go get it in center field, could hit the ball a long, long way. It was an intriguing prospect, and that is why the Angels went and got him in the first round. But unfortunately for him, at least so far, again, he's only 25, the bat has yet to come around. He's got really good raw power, but it's really been terrible bat-to-ball skills. Like the power tool, good. The hit tool, bad, bad, bad. A 27% strikeout rate in AAA the last 2 seasons with the Angels. That's already pretty high. And again, as I mentioned, it's well over 30% in the big league so far. And the issue is, too, like he hasn't had big hard hit rates the last 2 years in AAA. They've been around 31%. They were better. He was known as a guy who made better contact in AA and in the lower minor leagues with the Angels, but that didn't even translate to AAA, let alone to the big leagues. I mean, in AAA last season, he played basically a full season, 123 games, about 550 plate appearances, slash 261, 333, 386, hit 10 homers, struck out a lot, walked a little. It was an 81 WRC plus in AAA last season at age 24. It wasn't a lot to write home about. Now, for the Orioles, at worst, he'll just be another piece of AAA depth. You bring him in on a minor league deal, you can stash him in AAA. He still certainly has tools to work on to become potentially a big leaguer again. I don't think at this point, we're projecting him anywhere close to getting an opening day roster spot for the O's, but you can never have enough depth, especially in AAA, for when guys get injured. And Adams is a guy who's going to add to that mix. We know the Orioles love bringing in these like super athlete guys who have the tools. They haven't quite put it all together to be a big leaguer, but they've gotten themselves to AAA. A lot of these guys have had a taste of the big leagues like Adam has over the past few seasons. And the Orioles are basically betting on that athleticism to see if they can put it all together. And again, it's such a low risk thing. There's no such thing as a bad minor league signing. It's as low as risk as possible. And a piece of AAA depth. He's been better versus lefties, although you kind of throw some of those numbers out because not a lot of good lefties in the minor leagues. There's some pop in the bat. He's also played all three outfield positions at the big league level, and he is a right-handed hitter. So if you're thinking about, is there maybe a path for him to end up on the Orioles roster at some point next year? He does fit the mold of he's got speed, he can play all three outfield positions, and he hits right-handed with some pop. That is a guy who kind of fills what the Orioles are maybe looking for if they're trying to add one more bench bat. So that is at least one thing that Adams does have going for him. And again, he's only 25. I mean, if you're looking at typical peak age for baseball players, 26, 27, 28, 29, he hasn't even hit that yet. And yeah, he's been in the pros for a while because he was drafted at 18 years old. But the Orioles have to think they can fix the hit tool a little bit. Like it's you read the reports from Eric Longenhagen over at FanGraphs from Jordyn Adams as a prospect. And, he was drafted in the first round. And he started off really, really highly ranked in the Angels system. And then he just began falling down the prospect rankings as he jumped levels in the Angels system and eventually got to the big leagues. Although Adams, I believe he was quoted in a story last year, even admitted like when he first got to the big leagues in 2023, he didn't even feel like he was major league ready. And yet the Angels just kind of tossed him out there and he failed. And they have done that with a lot of prospects. The Angels do not handle their young players well. They probably promote them too quickly, and it has hurt a lot of those guys. Probably happened to Adams, and hopefully a fresh start will be good for him. And again, hasn't hit his peak. Orioles think they can fix that hit tool because it's a lot of swing and miss. It is not good bat to ball skills. But if he can hit a little bit and he can make a little more contact, he's got pop in that bat. He's an extreme athlete. He's a little clunky in the outfield at times, but the speed and solid arm strength can make up for it when he has the ability to play all three positions. There's a chance that if he puts some things together, he could find a bench spot for the Orioles. Even if it's not this year, he's 25 years old. You re-sign him to another minor league deal for maybe 2026, and you can grow him into tapping into those tools, that former top prospect potential, and being a bench bat for the Orioles at some point, because there's still a lot in there at age 25. There's some things that certainly need to be fixed up. And at worst, listen, he gives the Orioles some depth and plays all season in AAA Norfolk, and you kind of go from there. That's the nature of many of these minor league signings. But the O's did make another minor league signing last week, and this one, in right-handed pitcher Matt Bowman, this one has a lot more impact on the big league Orioles in 2025, and we'll talk about why that is coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Now, the NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel just has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love going on there and being able to bet on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. There's so much you can do. But not only can you bet on who will win the games, FanDuel also has bets for which players will score, how many points each team will score, and it's a whole lot more. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And today's episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by the DK Law Group. When you need a law firm, do you want the legal runaround, or would you rather have a no-nonsense approach? Well, you get the latter with DK Law Group. DK Law Group specializes in real estate law, estate planning, business law, and family law. They're tech savvy, they treat their clients like family, and they focus on keeping your legal solutions simple. And one of the things you'll quickly notice with DK Law Group is their transparent pricing. They believe in clarity in cost and that no one should be left in limbo. So contact DK Law Group today at dklawmd.com. And Locked On Orioles listeners can call today to schedule a free 30-minute consultation when you mention the tagline, Empowering Legacies. So we continue on with another minor league signing for the Orioles, and this one has a little more to do with the big league club for next year. As the Orioles have brought back right-handed pitcher Matt Bowman on a minor league deal with an invite to big league spring training. First reported by John Heyman. It is a minor league deal, but if Bowman makes it to the major leagues, he will make $1.1 million, plus he can make another $400,000 in potential incentives for, you would think, innings pitched and appearances and that kind of thing in 2025. Now, we know Matt Bowman because he pitched for the Orioles last season. Now, it wasn't the only team he pitched for, because Bowman pitched for 4 different clubs last year. Matt Bowman, the 33-year-old right-hander who first debuted with the St. Louis Cardinals out of the bullpen in 2016, has bounced around since then and pitched for 4 teams last year. 5 games with the Minnesota Twins, 4 games with the Arizona Diamondbacks, 1 game out of the bullpen with the Seattle Mariners, and then he found his way to Baltimore late in the year, and that's where he finally stuck a little bit. He pitched in 15 games for the Orioles down the stretch. In 15 2/3 innings, he posted a 3.45 ERA with a 21% strikeout rate and a 9% walk rate, and also a 41% ground ball rate for the veteran right-handed reliever. And even that, it was 6 earned runs allowed in 15 2/3 innings, but Bowman had 1 really bad blow-up outing out of the 15. Like, to be honest, he was good out there 14 of the 15 times he pitched. It was just 1 outing later in September when he allowed 4 earned runs and only recorded 1 out against the Yankees. If you take that outing out of there, it's 15 1/3 innings and 2 earned runs for 14 of his 15 outings. Now, you can't just take out your worst outing, but that was clearly an outlier. Bowman was really good in that short sample size in an Oriole uniform. It's a 4-pitch mix for the right-hander. He goes out there, sinker, sweeper, cutter, and splitter. He did throw 3 four-seam fastballs last year, so maybe you can count that in there. And 2 of those 3 did come with the Orioles, so maybe it's something the O's are interested in making him a 5-pitch guy. But either way, it's a sinker that gets a ton of ground balls. Opponents hit just 130 against it last year. It's a sweeper with a whole lot of movement. Not a lot of swing and miss for that pitch, but he throws a lot against righties. And then when he faces lefties, he does have his issues against left-handers. He is much, much, much better against righties, but he has a solid cutter and a good splitter. That was kind of his go-to pitch back in the day with the Cardinals. His pitch mix has kind of changed in the last couple of years, but it's a cutter and a splitter to get lefties out. The sinker is 92, maybe 93. The cutter's 91. The four-seamer's up to 93. He's not throwing super hard out there, but it's a really interesting arm angle that Matt Bowman throws from. It's kind of a herky-jerky, very deceptive delivery. He relies a lot on deception with his kind of funky stuff that comes out of that right arm. And it's just an intriguing profile for a veteran righty. I mean, right-handers hit just 157 against Bowman last year with that sinker-sweeper combination. He's at least really tough on righties. Now, he had that really bad outing in late September, but he was a solid member of the Orioles middle relief corps in September last year after they brought him in on a minor league deal and called him up to the big league team. But he was actually left off the playoff roster. He seemed to be like the final cut off the postseason roster right-hander Colin Selby, who admittedly has better stuff than Bowman, and I think has a better inside track to make the opening day bullpen next year. Selby got the final bullpen spot over Matt Bowman for the wild card series against the Kansas City Royals. It was not shocking, maybe a little bit surprising. And then the Orioles ended up outrighting him off the 40-man roster and making him a free agent this offseason. Now, when they did that a month and change ago, I mentioned that there was a good chance the Orioles would try to work out something to bring him back, probably on a minor league deal. And that is what happened. The Orioles were certainly interested in getting him back here. I'm sure he surveyed the land to see if anyone would give him a major league deal. Probably no one did. So he saw, hey, there's one or two openings in this Orioles bullpen. I pitched well for them last year. Why not sign a minor league deal with them, giving me some sort of inside track to potentially making an opening day roster? Now, Bowman is going to get every chance to win a roster spot in spring training. Again, there seems to be 1 to 2 open bullpen spots right now for the Orioles. I think the O's should look at maybe signing a veteran reliever before this offseason is over. But right now you're looking at a bullpen where I would say Felix Bautista, Yennier Cano, Sir Anthony Dominguez, Gregory Soto, Cionel Perez, I would lock in 5. And then honestly, with as well as Keegan Aiken pitched last year, he's going to be a 6th member of that bullpen. So you're usually working with an 8-man relief corps. So there's 2 spots open. Now, right now, when you are projecting the Orioles rotation, you're looking at Rodriguez, Eflin, Kramer, Sugano, and then one of either Albert Suarez or Cade Povich. The question is, okay, the one of those guys who doesn't get a starting rotation spot, does that guy immediately go to the bullpen as a long reliever? If we think that is the case, then there's one bullpen spot open, and really the likes of Matt Bowman and Colin Selby, Cade Stroud, Brian Baker, Luis Gonzalez, Chase McDermott will be some of the big names kind of fighting for that final spot. And I really do like Bowman. I don't think he's the front runner. I'm probably more in on Colin Selby than I am on Bowman. But even if Bowman doesn't get that opening day roster spot, it's actually the cards are stacked against him to make the opening day roster. Because he has that minor league deal, you can just start him in AAA to begin the year without having to lose him off the roster unless he does have any opt-outs in that minor league deal. But even if that happens, which is probably more than likely, if he stays in the organization, he will absolutely pitch for the Orioles out of the bullpen in 2025. The stuff is nasty enough. He got a bunch of outs for the Orioles last year. They liked him enough to bring him back. Again, probably an outside chance, but a less of a chance to make the opening day roster. But I think he stays with the minor league deal. He begins the year in AAA Norfolk. And I mean, probably by June at the latest, maybe even earlier, we see him up and down in this Oriole bullpen, trying to get some outs and certainly get some righties out for the O's again, as they did last year. I very much like that they were able to work out a cheap, no risk minor league deal to bring Bowman back and let him compete for a spot and give this team some bullpen depth, which right now, like the top of the Orioles bullpen is better than it's looked in a while, at least on paper, but the depth is lacking more than it has the last couple of years. So Matt Bowman is a nice guy to re-sign and add to that kind of back part of the bullpen depth. But those are players who were signed by the Orioles over the last couple of days. There are a lot of players across the league that went to other teams not called the Orioles. Some of them used to play in Baltimore, some did not, but all these moves have some sort of impact on the O's. So coming up next, we'll kind of whip around the entire league, the move from the last 3 or 4 days, and talk about how they impact the O's. That is right after this. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by GameTime. GameTime is focused on togetherness this holiday season. That means when you bring people together at live events, the experience is much better. And it's the perfect gift. And GameTime has a new feature called GameTime Picks that makes getting tickets for live events even easier. GameTime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Now, it's not baseball season, so we're not getting baseball tickets right now, but basketball, football, hockey, they got it all on GameTime. And maybe baseball season's your thing. In the off season, it's not sports time. You want to go see other stuff. Well, with GameTime Picks, the curation makes it easier to save more on not just sports, but also concerts, comedy, theater, and more. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB. That is LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? Game time. So to finish things off on today's episode, wanted to talk a little bit about just some other news and notes from around Major League Baseball. Let's start with 3 former Orioles who recently have signed minor league contracts with other organizations. The first one is Bruce Zimmermann, who signed a minor league deal with the Milwaukee Brewers late last week. Now, kind of an end of an era for the Orioles, right? Bruce Zimmermann, who was one of the many players who came over at the 2018 deadline fire sale. He came over from the Braves in the Kevin Gausman trade. If you watched him pitch at all for the Orioles, you know it was mentioned that he is from the Baltimore area and pitched at Loyola, went and pitched at Towson for a little bit. Like, he is a Maryland guy, born and raised, and got to come back and debut and pitch in the big leagues for his hometown team. Debuted late in the shortened 2020 season. 2021, he gave the Orioles some good innings. 2022, he had that fantastic start to the year and then really tailed off. You know, we saw him a little bit in 23, was mostly in AAA last year. It's dealt with some injury issues the last couple of years. Really, Bruce's issue is just the fastball velocity. Like, it's not a good fastball shape. It's basically 90 miles an hour. He still has good breaking stuff. Like, his slider is really good. He just doesn't have a good fastball to play it off of. So and he has a really good changeup too. It's just, you need some sort of fastball to play it off of, and it just doesn't have enough of one to be a consistent big league starter at this point. And again, the injuries became an issue. Like, he could have been more of a depth arm going up and down the last 2 years, but he had some injuries that kept him away from that. But the Milwaukee Brewers need starting pitching. And it was only a minor league deal with a big league camp invite, but they get something out of nothing with starting pitchers all the time. Again, Bruce still has the great off-speed stuff. I'd be willing to bet at some point we see him in the majors with the Brewers next season. And of course, great guy Bruce Zimmermann, just wishing him all the best in Milwaukee and hoping that he can get back to the big leagues. Another lefty we've seen a lot in Baltimore the last couple of years is Nick Vespi, who was sent off the 40-man roster this year, became a free agent. There was certainly talk about the Orioles potentially bringing him back on a minor league deal, but I think it's best probably for Vespi to get a new start. And he got that with the Philadelphia Phillies, signing a minor league deal with a big league camp invite with Philadelphia last week. And Vespi was the main up and down guy for the Orioles the past 3 years. Like, he would come up and go down, get some outs, key outs for the bullpen. He was great in AAA, but then he started to struggle a little bit more in 2024. And Vespi has some of the same limitations as Zimmerman. Now, he's a reliever versus Bruce being a starter, but Nick Vespi basically throws 90 miles an hour. And that's hard to have sustainable success like that in the big leagues. Now, he's got that natural cut to his fastball, and he's got some deception in his delivery. And kind of like Zimmerman, his slider is really good. There are still metrics there that make him a big league pitcher, but there's a ceiling for him. And the same thing for Zimmerman. It feels like we've seen those guys hit their ceilings with the Orioles. Now, maybe they go to another organization, they could get a higher ceiling. That always happens. It's totally possible. But for Nick Vespi, he ran out of options. Next year was going to be the first year he didn't have any options. He was outrighted off the roster. The time was basically coming. The writing was on the wall for Vespi. He did his job for the Orioles. It was a thankless role he played as kind of the main up-down reliever. It's not a great life to live. It's better than just sticking in AAA. It's better to be in the big leagues, but he never really was able to establish himself as a big league reliever. Hopefully he gets the chance to do so in Philly. Like, up until Sunday, Tyler Gilbert was a projected reliever in the Phillies bullpen as a lefty. Now, Gilbert was DFA'd when they traded for Jesús Luzardo to bolster their rotation. We'll talk about that in a moment. But even with that move, there are still a couple of openings right now as we currently look at the Phillies bullpen, especially with left-handers. So it would not rule out Nick Vespi playing a role with the Phillies next season. And then the final one is Nolan Hoffman, who never did reach the majors with the Orioles. He was a 2021 minor league Rule 5 draft pick by the O's from the Seattle Mariners organization. Funky sidearm righty, really good off-speed stuff, solid fastballs. Signed a minor league deal with the Texas Rangers. He became a minor league free agent this year. Orioles decided not to bring him back. 3.88 ERA in AAA this year. Good strikeout rates, really high 14% walk rate, though. Still has never been able to fully fine-tune the command from that funky arm angle. I wanted the Orioles to bring him back, but if you're looking at bullpens, maybe a bigger opening in Texas than there is in Baltimore to finally get to the big leagues for Nolan Hoffman, another one of the very good guys and just good people in this Orioles system, who's also a very fun pitcher to watch out of the bullpen in the minor leagues. Wish Nolan Hoffman the absolute best in Texas. Now, speaking of Texas, the Texas Rangers made kind of an interesting trade on Sunday. Nathaniel Lowe, their first baseman, who's been there for about 4 years now since he came over in a trade from the Rays, he was dealt to the Washington Nationals in a 1-for-1 deal. Lowe went to the Nats, and left-handed reliever Robert Garcia went from Washington back to Texas. Now, there were some rumored trades about Nathaniel Lowe, especially since the Rangers traded for Jake Burger from the Marlins earlier this offseason, and Burger, who is a third baseman, but the Rangers have Josh Young, and Burger's pretty questionable at third base. It's much safer to play him at first. It seemed like they were trying to get an opening for some at-bats for him. Lowe was getting a little more expensive, so the Rangers made that move to trade him away. And Robert Garcia was a really good return for the Rangers. Like, he's got 4 years of team control left. Had a great year with the Nationals this year. 24% K-minus BB rate, 2.38 FIP. Like, he's got some really nasty stuff from the left side. The reason why you're saying, Connor, why are you bringing up a trade between a first baseman and a reliever for the Nats and the Rangers? Well, it kind of brings into the talk of Ryan Mountcastle, because there's always the potential that Mountcastle could be traded this offseason, whether it's for the Orioles to open up a spot for Kobe Mayo, whether it's just trying to find some pitching, whether it's looking for interesting ways to bring in another hitter in free agency, whatever it may be. This gives us maybe a look at what Mountcastle could be worth. Now, Lowe and Mountcastle both have 2 years of team control remaining, but Nate Lowe is objectively the better player right now. Like, Lowe has been a better hitter by WRC+. He does it a different way. He doesn't, hit for as much power as theoretically Mountcastle can. He kind of sprays the ball all over the place a little bit more. It doesn't hit the ball in the air nearly as much, but he strikes out a little bit less than Mountcastle does. He also is a Gold Glove level defender at first, which Mountcastle was this year, but Lowe has been for basically his entire career. Nate Lowe, 2.8 F4 this year. Mountcastle, 1.5. Like, Lowe clearly has been a better player than Mountcastle, but Mountcastle is in the same category as Nathaniel Lowe, the first baseman who can hit a good amount and has 2 years of team control left. The Rangers were able to get a really solid to good reliever with 4 years of team control. It makes you think, if the Orioles were to potentially look to move Mountcastle, like, they could get, you would think, a solid bullpen arm, and a deal like that is just, do they feel like they have to? Do they want to? And also, a lot of the first basemen have gone off the board. There's not a lot of teams left looking for a first baseman. So the Orioles may have missed their chance to potentially deal Mountcastle to someone who really wanted him. I'm sure the Nationals called the Orioles and asked about Ryan Mountcastle, and maybe reuniting him with his best buddy Hunter Harvey in D.C. Well, I guess before he was traded to the Royals. Completely forgot about that for a second, because Harvey went to the Royals, got injured, and basically didn't pitch for Kansas City down the stretch. But gives you at least a little idea of what Mountcastle could be worth. Speaking of trades, I mentioned this one a little bit earlier, but this was on Sunday as well. Jesús Luzardo was one of the top starting pitchers on the trade market, traded from the Miami Marlins to the Philadelphia Phillies. The Phillies continue to bolster a great rotation in Philadelphia. Luzardo was number 4 on my Orioles wish list for trade candidate starting pitchers this offseason. He's got 2 years of team control left. Now, he had a tough 2024 season. He had an injury that kept him out for more than half the year. When he was on the mound, he wasn't very good, but that seemed like a lot of it was injury related. He's got amazing stuff, incredible slider. He's got good numbers throughout his career before last year, but 2023 made 32 starts. That was his only full season. He's had so many bumps and bruises and injury issues throughout his career with the Marlins. It's a guy the Orioles have been interested in trade talks for a few years now, wanting to potentially get him, but there's a lot of injury questions with Jesús Luzardo, and the Phillies go and get him. Now, I bring this up because, it's another potential trade pitcher that the Orioles are not going to get, and to do a little comparison on what the Phillies gave away. So they traded 2 very young prospects. 19-year-old switch-hitting shortstop Starlin Caba went in this deal. He is the Phillies' number 3 prospect and the number 71 overall prospect in baseball, according to FanGraphs. He has a 50 future value. It's like this elite hit tool. Like, he doesn't strike out. He doesn't swing and miss barely at all. He walks a solid amount. He's got good speed. He's got incredible defense at shortstop. He put up amazing numbers in rookie ball, and then he did post a 59 WRC plus when he got to low A this year. So there's still some questions about the 19-year-old, but Fangraph's very high on him as a prospect. And then Amarian Boyd, a 21-year-old right-handed hitting center fielder, was the other prospect that went to Miami. He, via Fangraphs, is the Phillies' number 13 prospect. He has a 40 future value by Eric Longenhagen over there. Another contact hitter with really elite speed, who, again, bat hasn't done everything it needs to yet, had a 90 WRC plus in high A as a 20-year-old this year. Now, I try to do the thing where I basically match this to the Orioles and say, what would be this trade from an Orioles perspective? Which prospects would the Orioles give up that match this deal? And the issue is it's hard to do that because the Orioles do not have a prospect like Starlin Caba. They do not have a 19-year-old in low A who's a top 100 prospect and has these like elite bat-to-ball skills like that. The Orioles, just the top half of their system ranking-wise, is more AA and AAA guys generally across the board that are much closer to the big leagues. Now, Amarian Boyd, he kind of reminds me a little bit more of like a Leandro Arias, who's a top 20 Orioles prospect, so that was a little bit easier to go a one-to-one match. But the Orioles just don't have a player like Caba, and the Marlins may have been looking for younger guys who are further away from the big leagues with more upside in this deal. So I tried to piece together a couple of more players that could match it. I threw in Enrique Bradfield Jr. because the elite speed and the contact skills and, you know, a really solid prospect who could be a top 100 guy potentially. And then I also threw in Frederick Bencosme, a double-A infield prospect for the Orioles with, again, good bat-to-ball skills. Power is questionable. Defense, where is he going to play? But he's a really kind of intriguing prospect in double-A. So that would be my match deal for Luzardo. It would be the Orioles sending Enrique Bradfield Jr., Leandro Arias, and Frederick Bencosme, 3 of their top 20 prospects, to the Marlins for Jesús Luzardo. So if that's the deal, let me know in the comments here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. Would you have done that deal, that 3-for-1 deal for Luzardo? That's the best I could have done, kind of matching what the Phillies were able to give to Miami. And then the last thing I want to talk about here, this doesn't impact the Orioles as much, although this is a guy they'll see next year. The dumbest trade of the offseason happened, I believe, on Friday night. Like, I'm recording this on Sunday evening after a nice trip up to Hoboken, New Jersey this weekend to see some friends, but I'm still ruminating on what in the world the Cincinnati Reds did with this trade. They sent right-handed pitcher Fernando Cruz, along with third catcher type Alex Jackson, over to the Yankees for the Yankees backup catcher Jose Trevino. This is one of the dumbest trades I've ever seen. Now, it's not the most blockbuster deal. It's a backup catch. 2 backup catchers and a reliever are involved. Not even a closer, a setup man, basically. But Fernando Cruz, although his ERAs have been a little inflated and sometimes he has a home run problem, and that's gotten back to him and some command issues from time to time, Fernando Cruz has 4 years of team control left. He's got a low FIP, and he probably has the best splitter in Major League Baseball. You could even argue that the Fernando Cruz splitter was maybe the best pitch in the major leagues in 2024. It is hard to find relievers who have maybe the best pitch in Major League Baseball. It had a 60% swing and miss rate and a 119 batting average against. It's basically a carbon copy of Felix Bautista's splitter. That's how good this pitch is that Fernando Cruz throws. Now, his other stuff is not as good as Felix's, and that's why Cruz at this point is not yet a all-star level closer. And Cruz is also 34 years old. So, even though you're getting 4 years of team control, you're probably not thinking a 37 and 38-year-old Fernando Cruz is going to be that good down the line. Very much a late bloomer to be this good in Major League Baseball with this splitter. But even with those caveats, like, hey, he's not going to be that good for the next 4 years. Like, maybe you have 1 or 2 more years. Maybe the Reds, they pitched him a lot the last 2 years. Maybe they ran his arm down, whatever. But still, the Reds don't have a great bullpen. They're trading away one of their best relievers in Fernando Cruz to get a backup catcher. The Reds have Tyler Stevenson. He is a really good young, not that young, but young-ish starting catcher. So it's not like Trevino they're trading to be their starter. They're trading for Jose Trevino, who lost his starting spot this year to Austin Wells for the Yankees, to be a backup catcher. And it's not like Trevino is this young guy who's going to be around for 5 years and could eventually be their starter. He's a free agent after next year. They're trading for a rental. He has 1 season, 2025, before he hits free agency. They gave up 4 years of a pitcher with maybe the best pitch in baseball. That splitter is nasty for a backup rental catcher who can't really hit and can't really field. I cannot understand what the Reds were doing. It's a little bit of like, hey, Orioles, like, give them Blake Hunt. Give them, I don't know, Rene Pinto, like whatever. Go and get Fernando Cruz if he was that cheap, because, man, he would have been a great addition to this Oriole bullpen. But even beyond that, like, I can't even get mad at the O's because they're apparently dealing with Nick Krall and the Reds, who just have no idea what's going on. Like, you couldn't have just signed James. Like, the Reds have been connected to James McCann, who's still a free agent. You couldn't have just signed him as your backup catcher and then also held on to Fernando Cruz and worked out if you really want to deal him, get actual prospects or better players for a guy who could be a really, really good lockdown reliever. Of course, I'm upset with this because the Yankees bullpen just got a lot nastier, and that's unfortunate for the Orioles. But, like, what in the world are the Reds doing? A nasty reliever with 4 years of control for a rental backup catcher. That worst trade of the offseason, it's going to be hard to beat that one. But that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. Make sure you leave a 5-star rating and a review wherever you listen, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever. Thank you so much as we get towards the end of 2024 here, still chugging out some episodes. Again, we are back down to the 3 episodes per week schedule. Got a Monday episode here, but look a little bit different this week because of the holiday. Take the next 2 days off. Then I'll be back with episodes on Thursday and Friday. If we get any Orioles news, of course, we'll get to that. If not, we'll continue to recap some Orioles seasons from 2024. We're going to look at Cionel Perez and Gregory Soto, a couple of hard-throwing lefty relievers, and how they fit into the Orioles bullpen in 2025. But that's coming up on Thursday when we return. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.